If you feel that I was a bit harsh in what I had to say in the last video, take a deep breath, because I'm going to talk about something I actually like. Silent Hill F is an amazing, amazing game. There's no other way to say it. Now, I'll be talking about how I felt about this game, and I'll try to avoid spoiling as much as I can, and if there are any, I'll put in timestamps for you to skip them over. For this reason, I won't be going too in-depth with its story and its themes. Any footage you're seeing from me is going through New Game Plus, so not everything will be exactly as it should be for your first go-around. If you've been keeping your ears perked around this game, you'll see a lot of comparisons with Higurashi, a visual novel that the main author, Ryuukishi, has also written. If you think that you need to catch up on the 100-hour-long read of that to prepare, ease up. It's not required reading material. But your enjoyment of this game will be 4 times funnier if you already read Higurashi, as you get the sensation equivalent to telling a Gen Alpha kid 6'7". You might be asking yourself how this is the same series just by looking at the footage so far. I understand why some people might be a bit confused on why this is considered an entry in the series, as the setting doesn't really allow for the brutalist and western decay that previous titles had with their environment. Now, I'll be frank with my relation with the series. With all things considered, I'm what you would call a normie. I've only played Silent Hill 2, the remake, and this is my second title in the series, so I don't really have the history like other fans of the series do. However, I think that this game captures the other aspects of what makes up Silent Hill. There is still the molding of the environment by the protagonist, the deep-rooted psychological trauma, the puzzles that were written from a Greek philosopher, and the resource management that has you second-guessing encounters. Now, speaking of resources, I have to address the elephant in the room. A lot of the talk surrounding the gameplay has been around the association with Souls-like games, and if you were wondering whether or not it does fit that term, not really. Granted, there is the stat upgrades, equipment that you can wear, along with a stamina system, but in my opinion, these elements aren't primarily made for you to experience a challenge in fights. It's to disincentivize you from fighting. If you go around fighting every single thing you encounter, even if you play perfectly, you will end up losing a lot more than you would have gained. But when you are forced to fight, it's a fight against your judgment on what weapon you should use since you don't have a toolkit to repair it once it's over, or what item you should use to heal up. The groundwork for this loop is very good, but here's where I talk about my less than positive experiences. To be transparent, I played this game the first time with hard as my action difficulty, and Lost in the Fog, the hardest difficulty, on my second run. I recognize that this likely wasn't the intended experience, as you're probably meant to play starting from story and dialing up every new run, so take that into consideration. On top with me probably being bad. Now, the weight of the attacks that you inflict and are inflicted with are very heavy, and in combination with the sound design, all makes for a very satisfying gameplay loop. However, I think that some gameplay mechanics need to be adjusted before release. One example of this is the counter mechanic, where you get a visual cue to stagger an enemy and interrupt their attack pattern. But the colors used sometimes mesh with the environment that make them hard to identify. On top of that, certain attack patterns are, and I'm going to be blunt, kinda bullshit. I won't talk too much in detail about the bosses where they have the worst case of this, but some attack patterns aren't really clear on where they start and end. And the punishments for failing to respond properly to these attacks are so severe that I felt like I was being spat on sometimes. A real highlight of this is a boss in the mid-game, if you know you know, where the starting attack staggers you for an extended period of time, allowing you to get hit unopposed if you don't immediately dodge as soon as you started the fight. The staggers and damage numbers really make this a frustrating experience, especially the endgame bosses, where auto drops aren't made clear to the player to stay alive. Outside of the forced encounters though, the gameplay loop is generally enjoyable, and has you voluntarily sacrificing resources to buff yourself and hoping you can recuperate in future areas. The weaker part of this game comes with the second realm that, for the sake of brevity, I'll call the Shrine, where the durability aspect of the combat is completely removed, making enemies more abusable in one-to-one fights, on top of having a more combative rather than evasive playstyle. Now, while the areas you spend your time exploring and solving puzzles in are on the outside like the Scarecrow puzzle, the most enjoyable ones come from the closed spaces. My personal favorite being the Ebisugaoka School, which contains great mandatory and optional puzzles, along with some great characterization. The only negative I can think of in the puzzles, and this is really me ranting about the final puzzle, is that some puzzles lack a purpose on what certain cogs are meant to symbolize in relation to the clues given. The biggest negative I can think of without spoiling is the hardest difficulty variant of the Scarecrow puzzle, where I'm not even kidding, the IGN staff were upfront about having brute force the first stage of the puzzle. Now, setting aside everything, The main reason why I love this game so much is 100% due to the story. Minor spoilers ahead, since I will be covering stuff learned from the game and New Game Plus. The things that Hinako suffers through mentally and physically through the course of the story aren't gratuitous, and yet, it will always leave you feeling nauseous at the implications. The real terror in this game isn't from the occasional jump scare, but rather understanding what each piece is meant to symbolize. In fact, some scenes are so horrifying. In New Game Plus, where you would be told whether or not you are actively skipping a new cutscene, you aren't even given the option of viewing a scene at a certain point. It's that type of story. The enemies are pregnant with meaning, with some symbolizing the fear of not being feminine, the sexualization by men, and the quite literal fear of pregnancy and childbirth. The themes in this game are communicated so effectively, you can't help but gawk despite the gruesome appearances. Speaking of the themes, the characters embody certain aspects of how the patriarchy harms younger people. Hinako, who suffers the biggest burden, isn't limited to just being tomboyish and listening to her father. Sakuko, who struggles with being a social outcast as a result of autism and her fear of the dark. Shu, who inadvertently worsens Hinako's condition without realizing, and the most hated character, Brinko. I'll be frank, I don't really see the hate here. The scenes where she acts like a dick as a result of her being possessive and controlling over Shu isn't really an indictment on her, but more so the environment around her that wants to mold her, per se. I think my only nitpick with the story aspect is that I believe this game is not meant to be a one and done, like in Silent Hill 2 where you can get the best ending on the first run. This game is best on a New Game Plus, and in my opinion, it won't really beat the emotion and horror on your first run. That's not to say it's bad, it's just a bit weaker due to repetition. All in all, I enjoyed my time with Silent Hill F, and if you haven't already, please play this game, provided you are able to handle the subject matter this game dives into. Provided that this game gets smoothed out with its gameplay and puzzle pieces, I think this game can be perfect, but as it is right now, it's a solid 9 out of 10. Badass seal of approval and all. If you have a problem with this game that I deem unwarranted, I will meet you in the parking lot at 11 PM. To have a respectful discussion over a drink. I'm still on break right now playing this game, but I do want to thank everyone that joined in for the test stream. It's likely that once I exit my break, I'll be live streaming my blind reaction to Danganronpa Another. It will be a while until I get to that point, so follow me on Twitter or join the Discord for any updates for when I start streaming on Twitch. I also might need a moderator to make sure I don't get spoiled by accident.
How I keep the rent low in my neighborhood.